The Spinoff Podcast Network.
This is Kiwi is back for a brand new season with more inspiring kōrero from special guests including rugby player, father and role model TJ Perenara.
My family bring me joy. Rugby brings me joy too, but it's not the same joy as my family brings me.
And global dancer and choreographer Kirsten Dodgen.
For some reason, people think I'm very intimidating.
Listen to the new season of This is Kiwi, brought to you by the Spinoff Podcast Network in collaboration with KiwiBank. Available now wherever you get your podcasts.
Kia ora, I'm Duncan Grieve, founder of The Spinoff. You can help us keep all of The Spinoff's award-winning journalism free for everybody by becoming a member today at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Every story is different and you get to learn so much that I can't imagine why I would get sick of it because it's always changing. Yeah, and it's always quite hard, you know.
Colourful lover, I'm Madeleine Chapman, editor of The Spinoff. Welcome to Behind the Story, where I go behind the scenes of a big article on the Spinoff from the week. If you want a weekly rundown of some of the best reads from the Spinoff every Saturday, make sure you sign up to the weekend newsletter. Today I'm talking to Spinoff staff writer Gabi Lardies about her recent big win at the Voyager Media Awards and her feature writing, particularly one published this week, an interview with Will Alexander, who was willing to die for Palestine. Gabi first worked at the Spinoff in 2022, so is categorically a junior writer. But as she confesses, she's secretly 33 years old and has had a colourful work history prior to becoming a journalist. Here's Gabi Lardies on Behind the Story. Welcome, Gabi.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
I think we will get straight into a very fun recent event, which was you winning a big award at the Voyager Media Awards, which is the biggest awards night for journalism in New Zealand. And you were up for Junior Feature Writer of the Year, which is an award given to somebody who has been writing journalism for fewer than 3 years.
Yes.
Which you
That's how I qualified because I'm secretly 33.
There's no age limit. You can be a junior at any age. And you won. You took it out. You were up against a fellow Spinoff writer as well, Charlotte Moodoo-Lanning. And
she was robbed.
Yeah, tell me. We can talk a bit more about the stories and things you were nominated and won for. But how was it to be recognised? You're very early in your journalism career.
It was very nice. It's always nice to get positive reinforcement, I think. Although you don't want to rely on it too much because it's unreliable.
Yeah.
How was it to win? It was quite weird and buzzy, and I had never been to one of those events before, so that was an experience that I could only compare to a school ball in terms of vibes and setup. But yeah, it was good.
Your writing that you were nominated for, it's feature writing, which I think a lot of people often get confused between what is feature writing, what is news reporting, what is analysis, what is opinion. Often they can all blur together, which is not ideal. Can you talk a bit about, do you remember, the pieces that you were nominated for? Because feature writing is, just to be clear, features are like creative non-fiction, I guess would be another word for them, which is interviewing people, but also there's a lot of prose and colour and setting the scene, and you're kind of taking people on a narrative journey while not presenting necessarily an opinion or anything like that. It's basically, you know, if none of it was true, a feature would be a nice piece of fiction, basically.
Of writing, yeah. Well, that's what I like about features. Probably because I think writing is probably my strength compared to some other parts of journalism, like reporting, which isn't to say that I don't want to do reporting, but I think feature writing kind of allows me to use the writing strength more than, say, news writing. So you have to submit and pay to enter the Voyagers. It's pretty expensive as well, like $150. So.
It's too expensive if
Yeah.
you ask me. Put that on the record.
Yeah, officially too expensive. So I submitted 3 stories. 2 were spin-off stories from kind of late last year. One was A Morning at the Death Cafe, which was so fun to write. I really loved writing that story. I almost worried that it wasn't quite a feature because I only did 1 interview for it. And I always think of features as having like so many interviews that you get buried in all this knowledge that people throw at you, and then at the end you have to like sort it all out and you end up knowing way too much. But that one, what a joy to write. I just went along to a death cafe, which is where people meet up to talk about death, one Sunday morning, and then I interviewed the facilitator of the death cafe afterwards. And then I did some research, and then I wrote it, and it was sort of done in maybe like a day, 1.5 days.
Yeah, I mean, you did just say you prefer feature writing over reporting, but actually feature writing does require a lot of reporting because you have to go and talk to people. You get quotes from experts. You talk to people who have experience with something. You only interviewed 1 person for the Death Cafe story, but you also quoted a number of people because you make those observations of basically laying out what happened while you were there, which requires quoting sort of offhand comments that people make. Is that I personally love that type of
I
feature
love
writing.
Observing people in kind of unusual places and events and just seeing what they're up to. And maybe I said unusual, but actually it's very ordinary as well. People just do that every month and they just hang out.
And talk about death.
Yeah.
It is a very good feature, and then quite different from your other features that you submitted.
Yes. The other spin-off feature was part of a series for the podcast Dear Jane. So to kind of sit along a podcast that was very much driven by a personal experience and narrative. So it was the feature I wrote was more about technical legal stuff around the age of consent and the history of the law and how it comes into play. And I found it really tricky because there was so much I didn't know before, especially like how law works in general and all these little kind of sub-clauses. And it was something I thought I knew about. Like, you think you know about the age of consent, but then there's all these other things that you don't know. Like, there isn't really a set age because then there's like a secondary clause where it changes and, yeah.
I think that's a thing that is sort of under maybe vocalised in journalism, which is that, especially with feature writing, when you go and write a big feature, a lot of the time you go in sort of knowing a little bit about something and you go, well, I'm going to, again, because features are not written just from whatever happens to be inside your head. You've got to go and talk to people and get expert views and do your research. And then you end up writing this huge thing about a topic that you had previously never thought of before. It's a little bit like doing a university assignment where you become an expert for about a week.
Yeah,
and then you present
like
it very confidently as if you have known this all along.
Yeah.
and then maybe a lot of it falls out of your head the next week.
Yeah, that can happen. And I was just thinking that I should have reread all these things last night or this morning. I was like, what was the age of consent law? Oh my God.
Now that you're an award-winning journalist, and that
Yeah.
that's a lovely thing that
I'll
I'm
take
sure
it.
you will put in front of your name at every opportunity. Has it sort of spurred you to keep doing what you're doing, try new things? Are you like, I'm going after investigations next?
I do feel a little bit more pressure now that
Oh,
Now
okay,
I have to like be good because someone official said I was good. But I don't know, actually at the moment I've kind of been struggling with knowing what to write about and having ideas that I really want to like get into, and even just having ideas full stop. So maybe it's good because it can like boost me up and make me feel better about myself. But then I'm also like a little bit in a little slump, I think. But that's fine. I'll be back. I'm telling myself that it's just fine to be in a little slump sometimes, and then you can just keep going and eventually be out of it.
You mentioned before that you are secretly 33 years old and a junior journalist, which,
Yes.
Even with journalism numbers going down and making it harder to get into the industry, and there's a lot of graduate students and there's a lot of student media journalists. How did you end up as a junior staff, as a staff writer for the first time at 33? How did you end up in journalism?
Well, it was 2021. Towards the end of 2021, it had been like quite a random year for me. I was sort of half employed working at a bar, another half employed doing freelance graphic design. I was trying to like pivot away from graphic design, which is the career I chose for myself when I was 18 and didn't know anything about the world and wanted to go to art school but didn't feel that was acceptable for my family. So it was very kind of job focused, and it seemed like a very obvious path for me, like, oh, you study graphic design and then you can become a graphic designer, and that's a job and that is very good. So I worked as a graphic designer for ages, like I think 7 years. But I always thought that maybe there was more to life than choosing typefaces and like being obsessed with colors. And it got to the point where I had been doing it for quite long, so I was quite good at it. But then I felt that every day my job just consisted of clicking the mouse, and it was driving me crazy. Or I was finding it unfulfilling. So what did I do? I went to art school for 2 years, probably to the bane of my parents' existence. But, I was probably already nearing 30, so they couldn't really say anything, although they did, but that's fine. I got a master's in fine arts, but a lot of the art I did was actually writing. And during that time I was, reading a lot of theory and trying to understand the world and what things I think are good. And so afterwards I thought that I still don't know enough about the world or like understand it, so I should really do like a Bachelor of Arts, maybe in sociology. So I went and did
This is
a year of that.
This is such a funny progression of decisions, but go on.
Yeah, also because during that time I got involved in a little bit of like activism and like on the ground left-wing political groups. And in those groups, you find a lot of sociology students. And so I was like, oh, they seem like they know things, and they're like always talking about books that I should probably read, but could be good to just go learn the things they've been learning, maybe. Yes, so then I did a grad dip in sociology, which is like it's like, because you've already studied before, you can do, it's like doing a bachelor's in 1 year, and you only do level 2 and 3 papers. And I also did some creative writing papers, which I loved and was obsessed with. So that was 2020. And then came 2021. I still didn't know what. I was like, oh no, now I have a master's in fine arts. Like, how is that going to help me pay rent? And now debt, obviously. Cool. And then I was like, okay, maybe the sociology thing, like maybe there's jobs. And then maybe there was like maybe policy or something. But then I would have had to do like policies. I didn't know about policy. And then I thought, everyone was like, just keep studying. And I was like, no. Like,
who's everyone in this scenario?
Maybe 5 people, friends. So I went to a career counselor because I was so lost. And, you do this like kind of personality test. And on the test, I remember writer was an option. And I was like, well, that's not a job. So I went for the other option, teacher. And I thought, oh, cool, I can do that. I can be a teacher. But for some reason, I couldn't quite get myself to sign up for the teacher's course at university. I thought, I'll just take a year to like think about it. And yes, I was having this weird year of thinking about it and writing a lot of personal essays and working at a bar and some freelance graphic design creeping back in just because money. And then I saw the Next Page program advertised first I saw it on Pantograph Punch, and then I would have seen it on Spinoff, probably via Instagram because I'm always scrolling on there. And it was a mentorship to become a feature writer, and something kind of like dinged in my head that if there's a mentorship to become a feature writer, that means that feature writer is a job. And so I was like, wow. And then before, it was quite a like elongated advertising process for these cadetships. And along the way, there was these like Zoom sessions where people in the industry talked about how they got there and like what their job was. So I very keenly like watched them all via Zoom or whatever. And yeah, I was just amazed that this was actually a job that was like you could live your life and do this job, and it worked out. So I applied, obviously, and I didn't get in because there's only 3 spaces. But I actually felt fine about it because I still knew that it was a viable option. And so I thought, oh, that's fine. I'm just going to like pester all these editors who had given their emails at these sessions, and I'm just going to pester them with pictures. And I'll just kind of like keep doing what I'm doing and add this on. Yes, and then maybe it was almost Christmas time. It was the Christmas holidays, and I got a call from Rose Bartan, and she was like, what are you up to next year? Like, what are your plans? I think she asked, have you got a job yet? I was like, no, I haven't got a job yet. I'm just chill, not chilling, but doing bits and pieces and, I don't know, getting by. And she said, well, someone's dropped out of the Next Page program, so would you be available to do it? And I was like, hell yes, I'm very available and very keen. And then, yeah, it was like, it was a little bit trial by fire, like just coming right on in and starting writing. And I was very confused and amazed when on the first day I wrote something and then you published it.
Yeah, that's what happens.
That blew my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just had 6 months of learning with Donna Chisholm as my mentor and everyone
Incredible
else.
mentor.
Like so many mentors because everyone I came across was a mentor. And yeah, just got me right on in. It was amazing. I didn't know that cadetship could be so successful.
I mean, it has been very successful because you did it and there was no guarantee at the end that anyone doing the cadetship, the hope was that you could go on and become a successful freelancer, perhaps.
Yeah.
You know, it was teaching you how to basically have a hopefully sustainable career as a freelancer who writes features for a bunch of different places. But you fit in so well at the Spinoff that it was kind of like, oh, how do we get her to just stick around?
Yay.
And it didn't happen immediately because, you know,
And I was pulled in some other directions.
Yeah, but then you came back and I feel like you've kind of really slotted it in perfectly in a way that people might assume that you have been doing this a lot longer than you have been. But it sounds like you intend to do it
maybe
for...
it's because I'm 33. And while clicking on a mouse for 7 years wasn't that helpful, I like to think maybe my brain was developing or something.
I mean, you would hope so. But do you plan to do this for more than 7 years, or do you think you 7-year stints?
Well, every story is different and you get to learn so much that I can't imagine why I would get sick of it because it's always changing.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's always quite hard, you know.
Yes.
It's always a good challenge.
Kia ora, this is Toby Manhire, here to urge you to tune in to Gone by Lunchtime, a podcast with me, Annabelle Lee Mather and Ben Thomas, tackling the world of New Zealand politics, from policy to polling, from scandal to psychodrama. Listen to Gone by Lunchtime, brought to you by the Spinoff Podcast Network, wherever good pods are sold.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spinoff Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBet.
You went and spoke to Will Alexander, who was the man who was on a hunger strike and had demands about Gaza and government action in relation to the attacks in Palestine. And that was a story, I think it was assigned.
I brought it up at the editorial meeting, but I wasn't really sure about it. I had just written, is there something interesting we can write about Will Alexander? And I wasn't sure because lots of other outlets had kind of covered the basics, that he was on a hunger strike and he had been sort of popping up on my social media. So I would see his videos, which are all like close-ups of his face. And I was sort of like, And I wasn't really sure about it. I was very cynical. But then after a little cynical comment I made, someone else at the editorial meeting said oh, it's a big deal going on a hunger strike. That's pretty extreme and maybe we should treat it seriously. He is saying he's going to starve himself to death. That's pretty massive. So then that sort of became the story, thinking about what does it mean to be willing to do that and what does that mean kind of physically for your body.
And you went and spoke to him, and this was you brought it up I think on about day 8 of his hunger strike, around
Yeah.
about, and then you went and spoke to him on day 10.
Yeah.
And you came back to the office and you said, I've just spoken to him. He did a good interview. I can write it up. But basically, and this is when you get into the weird overlap of, current events and news pressures, and also the kind of mundane processes of a 9-to-5 office, which is that we were about to go into a long weekend.
Oh, and it was budget day.
And and so suddenly it was like, well, everyone is covering budget day, so we hold it. And then we did have a conversation about, I said, do you think he will still be on his hunger strike next week? And you said, he said he was very determined in the interview. And so we held it for this week.
Yes.
And you were working on it, and we had planned to run it
on Thursday morning.
Yeah. And when I had done the edit on it, I noticed right at the very end you had a quote that was very fascinating. That was him telling people, again, you observing him talking to other people, and other people had asked if they should also go on a hunger strike, and he had said no.
Yeah.
And he had made quite an interesting quote about how it is more difficult and powerful to live for a cause than to die for a cause, which...
Yeah, and he had said that twice. He said that to me during our interview, and then he said it to someone else that asked him that question and was talking to him. So it was obviously something on his mind quite a lot. But even it didn't make me think that he was going to eat. Which maybe it should have. Maybe it should have been a bit of an alarm bell. But last Wednesday, I think it was, he was very committed. He seemed fine, quite relaxed, happy. He was like in good spirits. And that's why I sort of thought like, oh yeah, he's got he's buoyed up to do this and seems that he's going to commit.
Yeah. And then on Wednesday we woke up and there was a story that he had ended his hunger strike. He had been asked by Palestinians to end it.
Yeah.
Which, that's a whole separate story, whether or not you end a hunger strike or not, and you continue to fight for those demands that he had. But on a very small scale, suddenly your big story about
about him and his demands, I was like, is it all irrelevant now?
Yeah, we hadn't published your story yet, and it was a big feature, and that often happens. You can work for a bit on a feature, and you're constantly going, do we run it now and know that maybe we could have done something a bit better, or do we put more time into it, but then potentially it gets
things change,
overrun by events. And in this case, that's also on me. I said, we can wait. We'll wait and we'll publish it on Thursday. And then on Wednesday, it kind of became irrelevant because your whole focus was about an ongoing hunger strike. So what did you end up doing?
Well, it didn't take too long to sort of rejig the story and kind of, I really just added at the beginning that that it was over, and then kind of looked back at what he had been doing before, and I changed the order and the structure to end on that quote that you read out before, because suddenly it made so much sense. It wasn't a massive rewrite or anything, actually. And it was just a sort of rebrand.
And we ended up running it on
then it meant Wednesday. It had to go straight away, because definitely Thursday would have been like what, not irrelevant, but not as hot.
Well, you can read all of Gabi's work on the spinoff.co.nz, including all of the stories that we have talked about, which we will actually try and link in the episode description. But thank you very much, Gabi, for being on Behind the Story.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
That was Spinoff staff writer and Voyager Media Award winner Gabi Lardies on Behind the Story. I'll be back next week with another Spinoff writer and another Spinoff yarn. Thanks for listening. Talo for Lover. I'm Madeleine Chapman, editor at The Spinoff. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spinoff member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spinoff. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spinoff member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spinoff Podcast Network.